This is James Corbett of the Corbett Report. It's the 2nd of April 2009, and joining me on the line is Gerald Celente. Gerald Celente is an author, lecturer, and trends forecaster who founded the Trends Research Institute in 1980. His amazingly accurate predictions have included correctly forecasting the October 1987 stock market crash, the fall of the Soviet Union, and the Panic of '08. Mr. Celente, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk with me today on the Corbett Report.
Oh, James, it's my pleasure.
Now, Mr. Celente, as it's your first time on the program, why don't we start by introducing the Trends Research Institute to those listeners out there who may not have heard of it before. What is it that you do, and how do you go about doing it?
Well, what we do is we look at over 300 trend categories on a daily basis, on a global level, with the understanding that all things are connected. So rather than just looking at an issue, for example, as a technological issue, we understand that there are many implications and directions that trends travel in rather than in a straight technological line. So we look at changes in the family, social change, economic change. You go back to the late 1960s when they predicted that because of technological advancements, we'd be working half the amount of time we are now and have more leisure time than we know what to do with. And they were wrong because they failed to take in the accounts of geopolitical, social, and economic changes and only looked at it through a technological lens. The same true with the economy. They failed to look at all the other interrelated trends that are affecting the economic trend. So what we also do is we say that current events form future trends. And the great scholar von Schiller said, "In today already walks tomorrow." You can see the face of the future by the events of today. You can't predict it, but you can definitely see how the implications of current events form future trends. And we're political atheists. We don't take sides. We don't look at things through an ideological lens. We just give the diagnosis and let the data speak for itself. And that's really the background on what we do and how we do it.
Well, certainly, as I mentioned before, you've had some amazing success with your trends forecasts in the past, and I invite my listeners to go check those out at trendsresearch.com to find out more about the Trends Research Institute and what you do. But recently you've been making headlines with your latest predictions of the collapse of '09 and the Greatest Depression. So tell us exactly what it is you see transpiring over the next 3 years.
Well, the next shoe to drop in the real estate sector is going to be commercial. We're looking at what's going on in the retail sector with all these vacancies. Who's going to rent them? The answer is no one. Retail sales continue to soften. We start seeing more and more store closings. And you're going to see more bankruptcies, just like we saw in '08. We're going to see more in '09. So that's only in the retail sector. Then you look at the commercial sector of real estate and all of the office buildings that are not going to be utilized. They're going to start seeing vacancy rates increase probably to 25-30% rates. And the answer becomes, who's going to rent all this vacant office space? The answer is no one. So that sector is much more leveraged, for example, than the so-called subprime problem. We're talking about companies that put maybe $60 million down and leverage $6 billion. And that's where the big crash is going to come. Following that, we're going to go into what we're calling the Greatest Depression. And we're saying it's worse than the Great Depression because back then in the 30s, people didn't own homes. Most people didn't own homes. There was no such thing as credit cards. The American consumer was in $14 trillion in debt. We had trade surpluses. Now we're $700 billion in the hole each year. We had balanced budgets. Now, of course, with all these bailouts and stimulus programs, we're probably up to about $13 trillion a year in deficit. And back then, most importantly, we were a manufacturing country. We manufactured our way out of the Great Depression at the onset of World War II. We no longer have that capacity. Plus, we're an underdeveloping nation. Back then, this was an ascending society. Now it's a descending one in many, many different categories. We no longer win, place, or show when it comes to health, education, quality of life, according to OECD data. And you look what's going on in major cities and high schools. You know, you're lucky to graduate 50% of these kids. So we're a descending society at a time when the economy is failing. And so and again, you know, nobody could predict the future, and there are always wild cards that are thrown on the deck that you can't anticipate. So now with all of this stimulus thrown onto the deck, the slowdown, the depression is going to be stalled a bit. There's no question about it. I mean, you throw trillions into the economy, you know, it's going to, like taking a drug to cure a chronic degenerative disease. It doesn't cure it, but what it does is that it alleviates the symptoms. So we're going to see some kind of financial symptom relief, but the depression is well set in, it's chronic, and it's going to be a killer.
Well, certainly the forecast that you're making there and the trends that you're pointing out in terms of the descending American society is one that's based on thousands of data points and much hard research. But when the hottest selling retail items in the U.S. are guns and ammunition, and the hottest trend is starting a recession garden in your backyard, it's pretty easy to read the writing on the wall at that point. So to what extent do you take this as an organic confirmation of the growing sentiment of unrest that you've predicted? And to what extent do you think this is even a hopeful